Welcome, everybody, to First Thursday webinar. I am looking forward to this conversation today with Stefanie Rowe. I'll introduce her in a moment. Hi, Steph. Great to see you.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Stefanie is the first four-time. I think this is the fourth time she's been on. We need, like at SNL, they give a jacket away or something for that when you host so many times.
Yes.
Maybe we should start something like that. I don't know what it would be, but a crown and
a jacket. I'll take a
jewel
jacket.
in your crown in heaven. I'm Dave Miller. I'm one of the co-founders of Leadership Pathway. First Thursday of every month, noon East, except last month when it fell on July 4th. We gather and we talk about a topic that is important when it comes to raising up young leaders in particular. It's leadership development in general, but we tend to focus on 20 to 25-year-olds, and that's why this topic today of mental wellness and having a mental wellness plan is so important. I want to draw your attention. I've already dropped down in the chat. I want to say thanks to Flagstaff Creative. They make this possible. Jonathan Norton and his crew. When people see things on our website that's spelled correctly and looks good, it's because Jonathan did it. And the things that don't look good and are misspelled, I typically have done. And we couldn't do this without him. And so if you're a church leader or leading something organizationally and you need help with creative, they make simple, smart websites and design and stuff. And Jonathan is one of my favorite humans. And so I want to give him a shout out. I've also dropped Stefanie's website there, StefanieRowe.com. It's good. It's hard to get DaveMiller.com. It's a little too normal of a name. So good job, Steph, on that. Okay. Stefanie's her first four-time. She's been here. This is her fourth time. And why is that? It's because mental wellness plays such an important part of leadership development, 20 to 25-year-olds. And I learned this from her. I met Stefanie over, it's probably 15 years. I'm just going to say over a decade ago in Omaha, Nebraska. I sat many, many hours in her office as she talked to me and talked at me. And I learned the importance of this thing to the point that over the years, especially post-COVID, we've just continued to talk about it more and more here when it comes to leadership development. So before we get into this, I wanted to take just a minute and just share my screen. There it is. When we say leadership development at leadership, people ask, what do you mean leadership development? Everyone has a different take. So at our master classes, we spend a day on this. So I'm going to do it in 30 seconds. We say there's three rails that we all have to run on. One is education, and one is spiritual formation. And then one is, you might call it soft skills. We call it soft skills, emotional intelligence. This is where most of leadership pathways coaching is centered on, mainly because there's so much out there in education and there's so much out there in spiritual formation. But how do you do the soft skill thing? But we know that's not enough. So we frame in that picture with ownership, meaning we don't just pray about it and let happen what happens. We approach this like a coach would, owning that person's success to the degree that we can. Best practices, we want to be in churches and in organizations where it's 2024 or close enough to 2020. We don't want to do evangelism like it's 1990 and Billy Graham is still around. We don't want to do music or communications like it's 1980. So best practices. It all hinges on developmental conversations. We would say over and over, your resident, your intern success depends on your ability to learn how to coach. Your ability to learn how to coach. Education, we can scale. Spiritual formation, even we can scale. But how do we have developmental conversations about these things and soft skills? And then finally, a mental wellness plan. Those seven ingredients, when it comes to developing leaders, the core seven things that we talk about over and over again with church leaders. And this is why this conversation is so important, because mental wellness is at its core. Okay. That's what we mean when we say leadership development. So welcome, Stefanie. I'm excited for this. Stefanie is a licensed professional counselor. She's a church leader coach. She's a mom and a wife. She's on the teaching team at her church. She's an elder, or was an elder, or is still an elder. I'm not sure, at this church called Stonebridge in Omaha, Nebraska. It's a multi-site church of several thousand across the city. Welcome, Stefanie. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Hey, I'm glad to be here. And I love that you have mental wellness as one of your 4 walls.
Steph, it's your influence.
I love it.
It's your influence.
I love it.
Without coming through Omaha over and over again and sitting down there for 4 years and talking to you about it, I would have never, I don't know, what would have taken to open my mind to this. And really the work, the influence that you had on me and others like me helped us as we went into COVID and all the stuff, right?
Yeah.
Where all of this stuff has now become common language.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Okay, so before we get in the middle of one, I always like to ask everybody on this on these webinars, what were you doing? Tell me about Stefanie, age 18 to 25 or so. I'm always interested in what's going on in people's lives and how they were formed, because that's what we deal with all the time. So that's the first question.
I don't know if you want to know.
I do want to know. Yes.
Okay. I mean, it's like going back to the scene of the accident, right? It was some hard years for me. And I would tell you the first 12 months that I was out of high school, I went to 4 different colleges. I just had a hard time getting settled.
You mean you visited 4 colleges? What do you mean?
No, I know it feels impossible, but I went to 2 colleges the first semester. Then I went to UNL. Then I went to McCook Community College.
That's Nebraska?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then in that summer, came home and went to the community college.
Wow.
And then I went back. I decided to go back to the university. Once I kind of got settled at the university, which was my sophomore year, I found a home. I found people. I found Christian Student Fellowship.
Okay.
I found a home church. And I kind of settled. But that also means that my major changed 3 times.
Yeah.
During all that.
From what to what?
Well, my first college was a Bible college, so it was ministry related.
Oh.
Then it was journalism. And then it was family life science. And it wasn't until my senior year of undergrad that I decided maybe I want to be a counselor. So I talk to kids sometimes, like 18, 19-year-olds, and they feel behind because they don't have a 10-year plan.
Yes.
And I feel like, yeah, I mean, probably not, right? Like I'm a Swiftie and I love Taylor Swift. And so I've been talking to young people as if we're in eras.
Yeah.
And I kind of had my gotta figure it out era.
Yeah.
And then I kind of had maybe the boat's getting pointed in the right direction era.
Yeah.
And then when I landed in counseling, it felt like this is now this I love. This is where I'm supposed to be era. But I had been a counselor for 10 years before I started working with church leaders.
Oh, how about that?
And now I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be.
I was talking to somebody last week, and it's an interesting Google search is workism. And the amount of articles, not written from a Christian perspective, just in the marketplace about the worship of work and this thing that we especially put it on 18 to 22-year-olds. What are you going to do, and direction and picking majors and expensive education and things. And, we're over here, we can be guilty of that too. We try not to, when we say ownership, back to that framework, there's an ownership that's like you're screaming at the offensive line of the Nebraska football team ownership. And we don't mean that. We mean learning the art of coaching and when to gently nudge and be prescriptive, and when to just lay back, ask questions, and let them find the answers, because we're all still finding it. That's the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Who were you in high school? Were you a band person? Musical theater?
I was
athlete?
Speech and sports.
Softball or volleyball?
Softball and track.
Oh, okay.
For a while, and then just softball. Yeah,
Were you
it was good.
serious about your faith in high school?
I was pretty serious. I feel like
Okay.
that's probably been a gift to my
Okay.
life that I really have been I had good leaders and mentors. Looking back, how lucky was I?
Uh-huh.
Incredible FCA huddle in high school, great youth group leaders, a really good and healthy local church.
Yeah, man.
I had a youth pastor that was really insistent that he helped me find a place in college to grow my
Mm,
faith.
yeah.
And so I already knew about Christian Student Fellowship, had already met some of those people
Yeah.
when I went to the university. They encouraged me in my faith. They supported me financially when I wanted to do an internship with Christian Student Fellowship.
Yeah.
Um, they helped me get my first job, which was in a church.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
they used their network, their finances, their encouragement in so many ways that made a huge difference in my life. Set me on a path, set me on steady ground that I I think I realized more and more and more how lucky I was as I
Yeah,
look back.
for sure.
I'm parenting a high school kid, and so it's like not lost on me that it is
Yeah.
also like hard work to invest in kids at this stage of life. It's
Yeah.
kind of messy. It doesn't always maybe have the direct rewards that you're looking for. It doesn't always carry like the path you think it should. And then all these people kind of stuck with me through like 4 colleges and 3 majors, and you know all these trips back and forth down the interstate. I lived 5 hours away from where I was going to school,
Mm,
and just kept caring for me, kept writing checks, kept supporting me, kept cheering me on when I came home for the weekend.
yeah.
Great family. I have an incredible family. Great mom and dad, grandparents, really invested in my faith too.
Takes a village.
Yeah.
It really does. And I think you talk to anyone that's done anything, it's moved forward in life. You're like, you ask them that question, and pretty quickly names start coming to their
Yeah.
mind. And maybe we didn't call it coaching, or we didn't call it whatever we would have called it. We didn't when I was that age, but I can tell you the people
Yeah.
that came around me, and who knows, maybe they were sneaking around like, hey, you take him this week. He's wearing me out. I don't know, but they kept me from getting fired or quitting or, all that
Yeah.
stuff that we just try to put intentionality behind today.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay. On your website, Steph, you go to your
Hmm.
website, which if you're watching this live, it's down in the comments there. I'll put it in the, whatever they call that on YouTube, the notes section below, show comments. I don't know. And it says it's okay to have Jesus. It's okay to have a therapist and Jesus too. Is that the mug?
It's okay to have Jesus being a therapist too. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Talk about that. Why
Yeah.
that image?
Hmm. That's
Yeah.
that's been, I think, the hang up for me. As I grew in my faith and as I grew in my understanding of counseling and mental health,
Mm-hmm.
their attention kind of evolved that I guess maybe 20-year-old me wasn't expecting, of maybe a little bit of pushback from the Christian community. And this was a long time ago too, right?
Yeah.
This is the
Right.
early 2000s. A
Right.
lot has changed since then.
Yeah.
And people kind of, there was still a murmur of kind of like, is there such a thing as Christian counselors?
Right.
Um, can we pray harder?
Yep.
Is this
Yeah.
a sin issue?
Yeah.
Are we circumventing kind of the will of God or the power of the Holy Spirit by seeking professional counseling?
Hmm.
Are we looking for help kind of in all the wrong places if we go to counseling? And you can imagine, as like a church girl and a person who loves the local church, and as a lifelong Christian and somebody who felt like I tried my best to walk daily with the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
that was like alarming to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, wait a minute. What what?
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been ringing this bell about mental health in the church for like 25 years now.
Yeah.
And it has gotten so much better over time. And yet we know that about, well, at least in the ministry community, over half of the people who need help still don't get it.
Yeah.
And
And why
so
is that, Steph? Why do they
I
not
think
get
there's
it?
a lot of reasons for it. I think the higher up you are on the ladder, the harder it might be to kind of admit that you need help or just to
Yep.
see that you need help. I also think you have a lack of, talk about coaching. I think there's just maybe a lack of people who are willing to say, hey man, something's not right. you need to get help.
Mm-hmm.
And people get real weird about that, real
Yep.
defensive about that.
Yep.
We do a lot of other things instead of get help. Like we take vacations and we take sabbaticals and we go see a coach. We'll do some other things. But then really maybe what we need is to examine our mental health, do an assessment, get the help, get some professional help that we need.
You think it's gotten a little better because it has gotten so bad? Is that what's forced it in terms of getting better? I mean, it's more out there. It's a little more accepted than it was. Is it because it's so bad?
I mean, in my time, I think some big voices have kind of come out and talked about it in the church community. You can't understate somebody like Rick and Kay Warren coming out, hosting the mental health and the church seminar on their campus and being voices for people and families who have a loved one or who themselves struggle with mental illness. And then I think even in maybe bigger culture like Hollywood or the media, we see a little bit more acceptance.
Yep.
As we're recording this, the Olympics are on and everyone is cheering on Simone Biles, right? And we all know that 3 years ago, she left the Olympics because of a mental health episode. And she is healthy and well. And it's so fun to see, right? Somebody who got the help that they needed and continued to live a really full and fulfilling life.
Sure.
So I think all of that plays a part. I think COVID did kind of throw gasoline on a problem that was already there, and it kind of blew it up in a way that it just almost became too hard to ignore.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I still think a lot of us are going, yeah, but actually, like, what do we do?
Yeah. I think where I see it, from around the country, it doesn't, maybe there was a period where it was a little more geographic, right? Like you would just say, well, in the South, people don't talk about that. Sure. It seems from where I'm embedded to be a little more tied to theology. Like if we're the group, not to pick on any groups, but if we're the group that just pray it down and do the healing thing and then we're still, it's like you're saying something to admit you need to go see the doctor for that. I think there's still a mindset that way. Versus if they had just cut their arm off and were bleeding all over the place, anyone would say, hey, I think you should go to the doctor. You should run to the ER for that.
Well,
but we get into mental wellness issues and certain theologies still struggle to say that.
Yeah, and I think the pendulum kind of swung, right? It kind of did. I would say there was a time when I would tell people, like, it's okay to see a counselor. Or when people would come to me, they would want to know, like, are you a Christian? What do you believe?
Right.
Are you going to pray in our session? Or they might ask some of those questions. I do think the pendulum did kind of overswing to, like, who needs God if you've got a therapist?
Oh, interesting.
And then I feel like people kind of backlashed to that.
Yeah.
And we kind of are resettling in this place that really acknowledges both the power of the Holy Spirit, the community of the local church, and that these things cannot be replaced by counseling. But when we add to that a professional counselor, we can get the best outcomes.
Well, that's why I think your perspective on this is unique on this, because you're up in the pulpit talking and you're a licensed counselor. You hold that tension, and it probably is a tension. You're an elder. So you've been in the prayer meetings anointing someone with oil and expecting a miracle, right? And sometimes you see it. Sometimes we see it.
Expect a miracle.
I've seen it. But sometimes we don't. Sometimes we don't see it. It's time to go to the doctor. Time to go get help.
Yeah, and I think that even in that, it's just a shade limiting to think that God can't also work through the doctors and the counselors.
It all is the time different with open heart surgery.
Right.
We just tend to stop there. And so your point of it got a lot worse so it could get better. This part of it's now part of our onboarding with churches. We want to know, has your pastor ever referenced his therapist or counselor from the pulpit? Do you ever hear someone, does she mention her therapist this week said to her in passing
Right.
during messages? Or is this still the place where that would be frowned upon?
Stonebridge did mental health in the church. They did a 4-week series in April on mental health. And I honestly was not sure about it. I kind of felt like, okay, I'm in. I mean, I'm in.
Right.
But 4 weeks. And it was our best attendance yet. It was our highly attended. People invited their friends.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And I felt like we held the tension well between the power of prayer and the power of the Holy Spirit and the power of community and the power of the local church and medication and counseling and professional help. And that is a lot like walking a tightrope. And I think we get it right a lot. And I think sometimes we mess up. But we cannot stop trying, or we can't not talk about it at all.
Right.
Because too many people are affected to shove this under the rug.
Well, Steph, there's no crying in baseball, right? There's no crying in leadership. Or I've heard people say, are we ever going to be able to do difficult things again? Can we do difficult things? These 22-year-olds today, they're soft. They're soft. Everything from pastors to Bill Maher, who I wouldn't recommend, but I tune in occasionally on HBO. He just rails. He rails against Gen Z and young adults and how soft they are. So where is the line? How do we negotiate that? Yeah, this is hard. This is difficult. And for the first time in your life, nobody's getting you out of bed. Nobody's passing you on a test. It is a daily grind. There is no spring break. You don't get the summers off. In fact, you're going to work till midnight, and in some places till 1 a.m. on Christmas Eve. I'm sorry. Then you can go get on the plane and fly home. So this is tough. It's why we stay after the 2-year thing, because the first year it can be a hard reset, a hard new life. And then you learn from that, grow. And then the second year, you kind of self-correct on your own, and your supervisor self-correct. Where is the line, though, Steph? For my peers and people older, the Bill Mahers.
I was going to say, I think the Bill Maher, what I see in common of that is somewhat generational.
Sure.
Of people who are saying one thing to younger leaders.
Yep.
And I would say this, I don't know that what we've done in the past has worked. So like maybe we would say kids now are soft. I would say boomers have a lot of addiction or drank away their problems. I'm just saying, I think the problems were there, and I'm not for sure that people really coped with them in a great way then either.
Right. Of course.
But to say like, suck it up and then go home and drink it away in your garage.
Exactly.
I'm not for sure that that's a better option. Or just suck it up. This is the way it is. And then, have some massive moral failure from the pulpit that affects the entire church.
Totally.
Like, come on.
Listen, we do these master classes around the country. We had 25 leaders in the room in Cincinnati. Probably shouldn't have said where it was, but I'm not going to edit it. Anyway, there was probably the oldest person in the room, lovely individual, amazing church leader. And by the end of the second day, we're really down into this topic and having a spirited conversation. And he says, well, let me just bottom line it for you guys. No one with anxiety is fit for ministry. And I'm like, you just eliminated the entire workforce, basically. Yeah. So I just don't, and there were young leaders in the room who were employed at that church, right? And I just was cringing, thinking about, what does that say to them? What did you just communicate And it's nowhere near honesty and authenticity. Yeah. We say, residency is a two-way street. This is something we get to learn. We are
that's right.
We are being coached and we are learning from them on this topic.
Yeah.
If we'll just be open to it.
Yeah. So, okay. So I would say maybe, first of all, we would say, I think people have been struggling with mental health or burnout or stress or overwhelm, whatever you want to call it, for a long time. And they've been dealing with it in their own ways.
Yeah.
And some of those ways were healthy and some of those ways weren't healthy. And so in that way, it's the same. We still have people who are struggling with anxiety and stress and burnout and depression. But I think there's a few big differences. I think one is that we have a vocabulary to talk about it.
There you go.
And some more freedom to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so people do.
Yeah.
They're being asked about it. They're talking about it on their staffs. I would also say that I think things are harder today than they used to be.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I don't know how that sets with an older leader, but just the phones and social media alone.
Yes, of course.
And like the fact that everything is recorded and lives forever on the internet and can be shared.
Right.
And it's a lot of pressure. There's not a lot of room to make error.
Right.
And I think that when you look, this is Jonathan Helt's The Anxious Generation, but when you look at the rates of mental illness and the smartphone, they go up together.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I do think that it is harder now than it used to be.
Sure.
To live like a really well-balanced life.
For sure. I mean, people my age and older, nuclear family, grew up on a farm, like it was 1930 still or something. And the challenges that I faced when I walked into my first ministry at 22, let me think about this. What was the most controversial thing going on in a town of 15,000 in Kentucky? We were taking the 10 commandments off the wall of the public school. It was scandalous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, imagine a day where the internet was coming around when I started. It was really a thing for universities. I had to go see it at a guy that played in my band. I had to go to his office.
I was recruited to college with an email.
A dinosaur walked by.
Yeah.
And then the dinosaur came by. And when I tell a 20-something-year-old that, they're like, I can't imagine that world.
No. UNL, when they recruited me, they told me every student gets an email. Like that was awesome.
You were like, what?
I got Facebook after I had kids. I do think it's different. And I would say the research on social media is very interesting too, right? I would say it really tells us that we're like ingesting a cancer that doesn't really feel bad when we're doing it, but then actually has a terrible effect on us long term. And it takes 15 years or 20 years to get that research out.
Yep.
And it kind of reminds me of like the stuff I read about smoking, right?
Yeah. Totally.
And all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, this is actually terrible for us. What have we been doing? We need to course correct.
Right.
And so this generation has kind of been living in a lot of these kids have access to things their parents still don't know how to manage. And so this idea of socials and phones and smartphones and then when you add to that kind of culture wars and the political scene that we have, a lot of the unrest in the world and just our access to it, our access to be able to see it and learn about it and know about it because of, how easily accessed that is, again, through social media, but just through the internet itself.
Yeah.
It is different and it is a lot. I always say, like, God bless their brain.
Right.
Like that's a lot for when I think about my 19-year-old self, like rolling up to my fourth college and third major.
You would have been destroyed.
Thank goodness I did not have TikTok.
You would have been destroyed by now. During that, because you would have said something. as you walked out of the first dorm or the second? Yes, all of us.
For sure. All of it. All of it. Could have probably burned a bridge that never repaired.
Okay, let's talk. This is why I love talking to you, because you're centered on leaders, church leaders in most of your counseling practice. So I want to talk about young leaders.
Yeah.
Steph, if you're the senior pastor of your church and you need a mental wellness plan, people are like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, 5 years, probably before COVID, we got a call. Hey, our resident, he can't get out of bed. What do we do?" And they're, half a country away.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think we need a plan before we get to that moment, that morning, where they're literally standing in the host home's den with us on the phone.
Right.
So we need a plan.
Right.
So you're queen for a day. You're king for the day. Tell us what's the plan I need.
Okay. Can I share my screen?
I think so.
I'm going to do that. Because I want to show, this is actually your website.
Yes. Okay? Yeah. It's great.
And this, I would say, is a good place to start when I think about the whole person. And I'm going to start at the very top where it says Christ-centered community.
Yep.
Because that is the best place to start.
Yeah.
And you can see that we're going to go all the way around this plan, and we're going to end with professional counseling or medication. So I'm careful. This is what I mean. We kind of overcorrected at one point. We kind of cut everything out of this and we jumped right to counseling and medication. And that was like an overcorrection, because before nobody wanted it at all.
Are you saying overcorrected like during COVID?
Yeah, I would say around that time. Yeah. 2019, 2021. Yeah. We kind of went, okay, just everybody needs a counselor. And then it was like, there are not enough counselors in this world to do that. Right. And, on a good day, I can see 6 people.
Yes.
And most, I work with a lot of counselors too. And we're telling people, really 25 to 30 people a week is max. And so when we have everybody really wanting to go see a counselor, it's like, okay, either one of two things have to happen. We have to raise up lay leaders and other people to help us get through until we can see the counselor. But my experience has been that as we do these things, a lot of times the necessity for a professional counselor starts to minimize. And perhaps some people feel like at the end of this circle, they still feel like, yep, I still could benefit from a group therapy or professional counseling. And I would say, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But if we do these things, I feel like you're starting your professional counseling on third base. Yeah. Like, if you come to me and I'm saying, are you sleeping? Are you exercising? Yeah. Have you considered a support group? And the answer to all of that is no.
Right.
Then we're kind of going backwards a little bit in a way. And I know, so when you don't feel good, when you are really anxious and really depressed, these things seem really hard. And so I have room for that too. That these things maybe look to us like, just go to church. Right. Well, that's really hard for a really anxious or really depressed person. Yeah. And so I take these as big steps, big deals for people in their brain and their body as they consider what would the next step be. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't necessarily want to read that to you, but you can kind of see some of the things that are in there that I think are worth checking off. Yeah. If I met with somebody and they said, I absolutely do not feel well enough to volunteer, I would say, okay.
Yeah, right. Right.
What on this could you do? What here would you be willing to try? Yeah. And perhaps they would say, I'm willing to do, a daily devotion for 1 page, maybe.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to start there. I'm willing to walk around the block. Right. I would love that, actually. Yeah. I'm going to try to set a sleep schedule. Right. That's huge.
Oh, man.
Sometimes
I've read so many articles about one of the unhealthiest things you can do is lay there looking at your phone, scrolling right before you doze off.
Oh, gosh, yeah. I mean, okay, so I have some things. How are we doing on time?
We're good. We got 20 minutes. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. So do you want me to go back to that?
You can.
Okay.
It's up to you.
Yeah. Sleep if I could just like, if I picked a few on here that I would say, if I can't do it all, what could I do?
Yeah.
I would pick scripture reading, sleep,
Yeah.
moving my body in some way,
Yeah.
and probably like just if somebody would even that says supplements or a medical check, if somebody would be willing to see some sort of medical professional, they may not want to go to a psychiatrist, but would they be willing to go to a holistic doctor?
Sure.
Would they be willing to get some of their vitamin levels checked? Would they be willing to get something like their thyroid checked?
Yeah.
Sometimes there
Yeah.
are some things that if they get out of whack, our vitamin D is a really good example of that.
Right.
If these things get out of whack, then it really can affect the way that we feel.
Yeah.
I always encourage women to have their hormones checked, although men too.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of doctors that have access to that type of blood work that aren't necessarily a psychiatrist.
Right.
And that's a great stop on this wheel.
Yeah, it's
And
great.
I love like groups like Divorce Care or Grief
Right.
Share or
Right.
NAMI is the National Alliance of Mental Illness.
Yep.
A NAMI group or an Al-Anon group or
Yep.
some type of group, even a Bible study group, a small group.
Yep.
In some cases, we might not be ready for that. In some cases, we might be.
Yeah.
I think that those things can really make a big difference.
Yeah.
Before we get into counseling or while we're waiting to see a counselor.
I think you introduced this wheel to us a year or two ago, and it put it gave me language for my own story. A year before COVID shut down, I kind of discovered cycling. I was living in Denver. All my friends were doing it. So in order to hang out with them, I started riding a bike, and then I bought a better bike. Then I got a little more serious. And what that led to was reading books about cyclists.
Mm-hmm.
What reading books about cyclists did was open up, rediscovered a joy of reading, which led to reading the Bible, which led to getting up earlier. And then with exercise, now I'm going to bed earlier. Lost a few pounds. That was encouraging. So I cut the alcohol back. I cut the bad food back.
Right.
And you wake up 3 years later and you're a different person. You're a different person. And I can tell you, it quickly goes away though. This year I was sick a couple of months. I was probably 2 straight months without serious exercise, and it affected everything. And I was like, wow, it's amazing how quickly you can slide back on that without just little daily things. You don't have to dress like a fool and ride a bike 3 hours. I'm not saying that, but in fact, please don't. But finding these things, and one thing will lead to another.
It can, and that is the hope, right? It's kind of like a snowball, and the hardest part is getting it started. But once we get it started and we start moving it, it really starts to pick up a lot easier and quicker. But acknowledging that it's hard to get started.
So super practical. I'm working at a church. I've got to the point now where if a client, the church we're partnering with, if they call and they're like, she curled up in a corner of this, or he totally broke down. To me, it's like leadership malpractice, because you were told, hey, if you're younger than 26, specifically if you're younger than 26, you better have a mental wellness plan going in. And it's sort of like you wake up one day and, we've got a problem. I think what's happened there is there's a problem with that individual. If you would just slow down enough, and maybe that's where it breaks sometimes, is the lack of community, the lack of understanding, going slow enough to listen and understand that they're crying out for help. They've put on 10 pounds. They look terrible when they walk in the morning. They're missing a point. It's this progression down. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I love about that wheel is it could be something that, man, you just go in on day one. These are the kinds of people we are.
Right.
We exercise, we eat, we do these things that maybe will.
I mean, if people ask me, like, what is one thing, if I can only do one thing, what would the one thing be? I would say sleep with your phone outside of your arm's reach.
Heck yeah, man.
That would be my one thing.
Yes.
I would say actually put it in the living room, put it in your bathroom, set your alarm on it in your bathroom. So you have to get up and
you have to get out.
But people are worried. What if somebody calls? Nobody's ever called me in the middle of the night, but I
Yep.
still apparently think they're going to.
Right.
I say just put it outside of your arm's reach. Just
Yes.
because that actually helps us go to, when I do that, and I do not always do that. When I do that, I will go to bed earlier.
Yep.
And sleep better.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I don't have all that blue light in my face right before I go to
Right.
sleep. And
Right.
I'm like literally scrolling the world's worst news before I go to bed.
Yes.
It is just like, and then I'm surprised. Am I surprised that then I don't sleep?
Right.
Or that I toss and turn, or that kind of my brain gets flicked on and now I'm thinking about all this stuff? I am not surprised by that. And if I put my phone outside of my arm's reach and I have a paper book that is just good writing,
Yeah.
not even really like a
Yeah.
self-help, and I just read something and go to bed, say my prayers,
Right.
hug my husband and go to bed,
Go to sleep.
I am going to sleep so much better. And and that over time adds up a lot.
Listen,
And the
Steph, this
alternative
week, we're
over
probably
time.
all in tune with when we sleep poorly, what it does to us, because we're watching the Olympics. At least we are. We're going to bed late. And I'm not going to tell you, but it's not very late. But for us, it's late. And man, it's tough in the morning getting up and going. And
then
okay,
we're now tempted to nap. Then we eat like crap because we're tired. We don't work out. We're kind of logging our way through things. Oh, it's just so easily how one thing leads to another. It's tricky.
Okay, the topic is, what are you learning? What have you learned new?
Good.
So let's do the last couple minutes on that. What have you learned that's new? You got another magic wheel or something you could give us?
No, I don't have enough. I've got a couple things though.
Okay.
I have talked to more younger leaders, I would say, in the past year, and so that's been exciting. I've kind of I'm in a space on some things that I'm working on where I just have access to younger leaders and a lot of people helpers, a lot of pastors and counselors. And so that has been exciting.
Yeah.
What I see, I think other people are seeing too, because as I read, I see other people saying this too. I think that younger leaders they have a big heart. Mm-hmm. They really, truly want to make a difference.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that tons.
Yep.
I am the one who is bringing up things like a livable wage and salary, because I think it's going to come. I want them to think about that.
Yeah,
but that's actually not what they're leading with. They're leading with just kind of a big heart, empathetic. I feel like they're also incredibly realistic, and I can appreciate that. Yeah. I also think because of that, they need a lot of encouragement. Mm-hmm. We can, whatever, you can say whatever you want about this generation, but they are the next generation. They're incredible. Mm-hmm. And when we speak their language, mountains move. Mm-hmm. And one of the parts I believe that we cannot get enough of is just encouragement. Mm-hmm. This is what I see you doing well. This is what I see in you. This is what I think you would be good at. This is, you did this thing and you killed it.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
I would say at the same time, this generation handles, but needs us to be clear, direct, and kind. Right? So my experience, and it's fairly limited to my own house and the people in my office, maybe, my experience has been clear, direct, and kind. They kind of go, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I got it. So we're not going to wear that to work. This is not acceptable.
Yeah, right.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Right.
Clear, direct, and kind. And I think that maybe my age and older still really kind of beats around the bush in a passive aggressive way about some of this stuff.
Especially in church staffs.
Especially in church staffs,
we're pastoral. A lot of us are,
I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. I don't want to. I would say I think it's hurting their feelings by you not saying something and then expecting that of them and then holding them accountable to it.
Yeah, it's good.
So we can be clear, direct, and kind in a way that is still supportive and encouraging. And that is not mean or bad.
Yeah.
It's not wrong. It's okay.
What a concept.
Yes. I think of people who are clear, direct, and kind with me. If I went all the way back to those high school leaders, my college
Yeah.
leaders,
Yeah.
some conversations still to this day that ring around in my head because of how clear, direct, and kind those people were to me. And I
Hmm.
want you to know my brain interpreted that as they must really care about me if they're
Yeah.
willing to
Right.
stick their neck out like
Right.
this.
It's great.
Okay, I also think that we're doing a better job and we can keep thinking about having a robust life outside of work. So this is something that I think all people of all levels of leadership could just think about. And then I think we could think about that with younger leaders too. Both, are we encouraging it and are we modeling it? I don't know. But I think the day of like work is your life, work is your family,
Hmm.
work is, I don't go anywhere because I'm here 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Yep.
like sleep on the floor of my office. I don't know. I think those days are going.
We're done.
I
We're
don't know
done with
that they were good in the first place,
that. No.
but I think we're moving on. And I think this generation really does want time and space and energy to have a full life.
Yeah.
And that means, I hope, on all levels of church leadership, that people are looking to make friends and meet people and have a community inside and outside of the church.
Yeah. I will tell you what you're describing only comes through great intentionality.
Oh,
So every
I
leader
completely
that's
agree.
listening to this, if they're the Enneagram 3, and most of the bosses are 3s or 8s, they're the go-getters, the type A, the get it done. That's who we hire at churches. And then 10 years later, they're managing people and they immediately start thinking, Steph, I love what she's talking about. That's for other people. I don't have time for that. So I will tell you, only through coaching, only through great intentionality does that stuff happen. This is this is the two-way street thing of having 20 to 25-year-olds, having them around, not so they'll learn how to do it the way I did it. No, and because they're looking at me thinking, I don't want to be like you. I need to be learning from them on this topic.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
big learning of ours, look at this generation like you would cross culturally to an unreached people group. We reach them very differently today. We go there, we sit with them, we understand their customs, their language, their clothes. It's a two-way street with unreached people groups in the jungles of some country somewhere, right? We don't go in like it's 1960 and hand them all Southern Baptist Sunday school curriculum anymore, right? We go and we sit with them and we learn from them and we allow them the dignity of serving us. If we could look at Gen Z like that, it would just unlock so much of the way that we're approaching this. Unfortunately, on this topic in particular, it's really tough because most are my age and older. Most have 3 or 4 decades of really bad behaviors. Mainly it's workaholism.
But let me add to that, Dave, because most of those same people, over 70%, describe themselves as lonely.
Sure.
Almost half describe themselves as depressed.
Yeah.
Over half of them need help but aren't getting it.
Yep. Yeah.
A lot of them are struggling with an addiction. Of the people
Barna,
struggling with an addiction.
Is that the Barna?
Yeah, this is all State of the Pastor. Yeah. So I think that is my point to somebody who says, why can't you be more like me?
Right.
Well, no thanks.
No thanks.
No thanks. And I would say as a older leader or a boss, that can be obviously a hard word.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, we have an incredible group of leaders who are trying to make a way for them to serve the God and serve the church for the long haul in a healthy way. And I think that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, what are the levers that we want to encourage them to pull, right?
Yeah.
This is the maximizer in me. If I have a young leader in front of me and it's like, okay, we've got like 3 things or something, right? I already told you to put your phone outside of your arm's reach, so I'm going to add that's in parentheses. That's in there. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Well, I would say we need to have an active spiritual life of
Yep.
our own.
Yep.
We need good, true friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And we need people in our life who are clear, direct, and kind.
Yeah. So good.
We can do that.
Yeah, we can do that.
We can do that.
I love that, Steph.
We can do it.
StefanieRowe.com. We're going to close with this. Give us the couple of sentences, like what you do. You stand in between mental wellness and church leadership somehow.
Yep. Yes. Yeah, I support and encourage and educate and coach and counsel.
Yeah.
A lot of people helpers, including church leaders and Christian counselors, so that we can live healthy lives and so that there's a positive net trickle down effect into the people that we serve.
That's great. Love it. Okay, StefanieRowe.com. It's in the show notes. And when you're ready, there's a link for you as well. If you want to learn how to find Gen Z, support Gen Z, help develop Gen Z, it is the future. It's now. I mean, this is the church of now. It's not the next generation. They should be on your team. They probably are not if you're listening to this and you're a church leader. How can you navigate that? And that's what Leadership Pathway does. When you're ready, click on that. Stefanie, this has been amazing. If I was a church leader and I listened to this, I'd be like, where's that StefanieRowe.com link? I'm sure there's only one opening in the next 3 weeks or month and I would, get in line now for that.
Sure. So hit me up. I am happy to help. I really am.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.